Today, I talked to Kristen Mercurio, a virtual teacher who built a following that is mostly international learners. And she talks about the differences of that versus teaching here in the United States, of how she has funneled classes and built up all these different classes in many different subject matters, how she's a moderator for a Facebook group for the international learners, what kind of resources you can use, how she's collaborated. She has networked with other teachers and just really built this as a business. It was a really fun conversation, so I hope you enjoy. Great. Hi, Kristen. How are you doing today? Thank you so much for being on the podcast with me. And I understand that everybody just calls you M because of your last name being hard to pronounce.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And yes, Mercurio is a mouthful, even for adults. So M is what all of my colleagues call me and the students.
Awesome. So tell me about your teacher business, how you got started, what, if you do anything else, and just kind of a little bit about your journey, how you got here to be a virtual teacher.
Sure. I was actually introduced to Outschool by another teacher who I taught with in person, and she was teaching on Outschool, and it was right before before pandemic. And I was doing other things online. I was teaching English to students that lived abroad, but I was also teaching English to adults that lived in China through their human resource department. And I was also doing virtual life and health coaching. So I was doing a lot of other things from online at the time. And I was hoping to transition out of the school system itself and create my own curriculum and really focus on the students' needs rather than testing all the time.
Right. And what did you teach in the school system?
Everything. I'm a special education teacher. So we're usually needed in so many different capacities. So I'm certified in K-12 special ed, but also middle grades English, physical education, K-12. So I was also a coach. I've taught elementary at like turnaround schools. So schools that were failing and needed the behavior interventions to come in. I did that as well. I was also a reading coach for teachers and students. And I was a case manager for my students with individual education plans, and I was a team lead. So I've done everything from kindergarten through 12th grade and also adults.
Right. And I'm sure not all of that was at the same time, but that was a big, overwhelming list of things that you did. And it sounds like transitioning to virtual teaching and doing the other coaching and things from home might be a little bit more manageable.
It is. And I actually had 7 preps at one time in the school district. So 7 preps meaning 7 different classes. And so you're writing, lesson plans for those. But I also had 40 students that I'm writing their IEPs and tracking their data and communicating with their parents and teachers. So in a high school setting, you're talking about 130 kids in your class and then 40 that you're having IEP meetings for, and you're having to miss class because you're in an IEP meeting. So there was substitutes, and I specialize with children with behavior. So to have a substitute so often, it kind of throws off the dynamics for those students. Juggling what I do at home and what I do, at least this way, I'm really just working in a partnership, I would feel like, with parents more so than if I was at a school.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I can relate completely. I was an art teacher in a school. So K through 12, you saw everybody as much as they could cram into my schedule anyway. So it was impossible to actually take a day off and have a sub without it causing you so much more work. Yeah. So now that we are both virtual, it's almost like this weight has been lifted off of my shoulders. It's just like, I can do this.
Yes.
When I wake up in the morning, there isn't that overwhelm.
Yes, exactly. And I am excited to wake up. And honestly, at first I was like, I really like collaborating with other teachers. And I thought I was going to miss that. But I have met amazing teachers that I work with on a regular basis through Outschool. And so they've become really good friends.
So that's one of the things, that's one of my goals actually, is to just bring more teachers together, because that is the one thing that I feel is so important. And one of the things I miss about being in person, I don't miss my 37-minute drive. I don't miss so many of the other things, but my coworkers, I love dearly. I have a group of them that I'm still in constant contact with. And whenever I became a virtual teacher, I felt like you saw people in the Facebook groups and in the different forums, and you could watch videos on YouTube, but you didn't know them, you know? And so making those connections. And whenever I discovered my Outschool bestie, you know, it was like, oh, okay, we can navigate this together. So tell us how you've discovered or just really met and gotten to know these other virtual teachers.
So two of them that I talk to on a daily basis, we actually tried to form a pod before it became a pod
Okay.
thing on Outschool. We were doing that for middle school. So we still collaborate. One teaches social studies. The other one is a language arts teacher. I'm also a language arts teacher, but because I teach so many classes on the subject of science, I said, you go ahead and handle English and I will handle science. So I still talk to them every day. I have another teacher friend who I actually taught her child, but she messaged me afterwards and she was like, I am an entomologist and I can't even imagine teaching this content to a 5-year-old. Like, how did you do that? So
Oh,
like,
I love that. She like
yeah.
she's asking your advice and you guys are going to be able to collaborate that way.
Yeah, but she's amazing. Like, I was like, what are you talking about? She actually makes her own stories to teach entomology to children and she
Oh,
animates
cool.
them on Outschool. So
What?
yeah,
She
she's
animates
awesome.
them?
Yeah, she animates them on PowerPoint and all this other stuff. She makes her own stories. So I talk to her regularly and she's in Canada.
But don't you think that that's part of it? Like, it's just that validation of like, this is my idea. Is it going to work? You know, like being able to bounce those ideas off of each other and just getting that feedback from someone else. And that's what she needed. And it was so nice that she was able to reach out to you and you were able to help her. And now look at you, like
Yeah, and
your
we
friends.
refer students to each other. So like
Right.
if I have students that really love insects and I only have 4 classes on certain insects, I will tell them take her classes. You know, like
Mhm.
she is amazing. If you are considering entomology, take her classes. And she actually branched off and made classes for older students. But this is a lady that I now speak to every single day, and I've taught her other children now.
Right.
But a lot of the people that became very close friends, they're actually other teachers and
Mhm.
they have children that take my classes. So we are close in different ways, right? Like
Right.
they're parents, but they're also now my friends.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
so I think that that's kind of what people have to understand, that we're in our own spaces and we're by ourselves every day. And no, I don't have to get in my car most of the time. And I don't actually see them physically, but you can still make those connections, whether it's with your students or with other like it's almost like we have coworkers, but we're just not physical in the same place, coworkers.
absolutely. And like
Yeah.
even before one of us will publish our new class, we'll send it to each other like, hey, does this look like appropriate, like with the parental guidance? Like, yes, it was approved by Outschool. Do you think I need to add any, like I have like a Greek mythology class. Do you think I need to add anything else about, you know, that the parent should know in this section? And then we just check over each other's lessons and things like that, or even the resources, especially now with there's new
Right.
rules on Outschool. Like, hey, do you think this one's going to be okay for the new COPA regulations or
Right.
something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
These are the guidelines. I
Hmm.
think they're okay. I just need a second set of eyes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So since you do teach such a broad range of subjects and you're certified in multiple things, what would you say you teach the most, or is it kind of most, is it even age groups, classes? Do you have a favorite? Tell me about just your course load.
So I went in saying, I am teaching high school. I love high school. It's my passion. But there's not a plethora of high school students taking
Right.
classes. And in the science realm, the parents want labs. And from a business standpoint, I don't want that kind of liability to have in-person labs if I don't know if a parent is going to be present for these labs, or
Oh,
the
that makes so
materials.
much sense.
And the materials can be very costly for labs. And there's some things that I don't have access to anymore as a because of commercial purposes. So I can't do virtual dissections through a textbook because I don't have permissions. So I started making content for ages 6 to 9, 6 to 10. And that's where there's so many students, that age group, that 6 to 9, 6 to 10. So I would say that most of my students are in that age range. I do have a very nice following for high school, but mostly for my critical thinking classes. And I'm just starting to build my middle school because I started teaching a chemistry class. So more, more of the students that want those academics, then I'm getting them earlier, like 11 and 12. It's kind of like I filtered them in. I've had them since they were 10 or 11, and now they're following me over. It's just sometimes with the middle school ages, for me, it's not enough to hold a class where they would have a lot of engagement.
Right. And that kind of leads to my next question about, like, how do you funnel your classes? Because of having so many different subject matters that you are teaching, you know, it's not, how do you have time, I guess is what I'm saying, to create that build up of classes and the just variety to keep students coming back to you because they're interested in what they originally took?
And so that has been a little bit of a challenge because I do have students. So I have offered, since I started a year and a half ago, I have over 100 that have been published as far as classes go.
Oh my goodness.
And that is not like my ongoing. So ongoing, you have to have a different topic every week.
Right.
So I have some students that have taken every class of their age group with me. So in my head, as a business owner, I have to have something that they're coming back for, right?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm going to lose them. So I have to make sure that they have content to enroll in. So that is really what keeps me going. Is I want those kiddos that have been with me since day one and have continued. I mean, they've taken 90 classes because that's what I've offered for their age group. I have to keep them. And parents also will say, hey, we're doing this in homeschool, or they're doing this at school. They need extra help with it. Can you help me? And if it's an area that I am familiar in, then I will sit down and look at the curriculum of wherever they live. I teach mostly international students. So I have to look at the curriculum in Scotland. I have to look at the curriculum of South Korea and say, okay, how does this compare to what I actually know? And can I create content for this parent?
And how challenging has that been? Because you're seeing, like, you just named several countries that you're looking at curriculum, and does it vary greatly compared to ours in the United States?
100%. So they are my students in that are international, which is what I mostly teach. I would say 80 to 90%. Their curriculum is far more challenging than our curriculum here in the United States, or it's structured differently. So they put more of an emphasis on certain things like social studies and science than we do. Like sometimes we kind of push that away until like 3rd, 4th, 5th grade because we don't test on it. So it's pushed to the back burner. Whereas I have students in India that can tell you names of people in civics and names of people that are, and it's unbelievable. They learn this from kindergarten. They learn it from 1st grade. So I mean, I have students in South Korea that can tell you every single country in Africa off the top of their head.
Wow.
And then I have students the same age that they can't even differentiate between Africa and South America when you show them a picture that are in the United States. So it's very, very different as far as the rigor. Yeah.
And so if you teach mostly international students, what kind of, there's so many questions. So time frame, what time are you teaching? Are you a morning person, or do you do it late at night? And how does that vary? And then I'll get into other questions.
So I have approximately 2 days a week where I have night classes. So I will have classes from 7 p.m., which target my students in California, Hawaii, but also some of the countries in Asia and Australia and New Zealand. because
Okay.
it's roughly like their lunchtime in New Zealand. So 7 o'clock all the way till about 10 or 11 o'clock. So 2 nights a week. So when I teach till 11 o'clock at night, I'm not going to schedule an early morning class the next day.
No.
But on my typical day, so 3, 4 days a week, I am waking up usually at 3:45, 4 o'clock, because my classes will begin at 4:30 or 5 a.m. And
Okay.
those are a lot of my homeschool European students that will take classes that early, as well as Asia, because it's nighttime for them. I mean, my 7 a.m. classes, I have students in Korea who are taking classes at 9 p.m. their time.
Wow.
So yeah. And
Yeah.
we have to think of how important education is in South Korea, that they are 8 and 9 years old taking 9 o'clock classes, right?
Right.
So
Instead of going to bed.
yeah. But I also will teach up until about noon, because that's the latest my students in London, Scotland will take classes until
Right.
about 6, 7 their time. So that gives me the afternoon. I don't teach afternoons. It gives me the afternoons for doctor's appointments or going to the grocery store, and then I'll pick back up at like 7, 8 o'clock at night.
Okay. So you're doing a split shift some days.
Yeah, some days.
Yeah, which isn't it great though that we can do that, where I will set breaks, or I have my ongoing classes that are all set and I teach in the afternoon. So we're opposite of each other. But if I want to, I add in a one-time class early morning, see how it goes. Occasionally I'll add that evening class or the weekend class. And it's so nice to have that flexibility where, most jobs you arrive. I mean, as a school teacher, there was no being late. You arrived at 7:02, and it was an odd time always, 7:02 whenever you had to be there when that bell rang, because those kids were walking in and you had to be there at their set times, and there was no flexibility in that.
Exactly. It made appointments or vacations or anything like that very challenging. Whereas this I can take with me. Like I was in Pennsylvania and Ohio this weekend, and I can bring my computer with me. If I decide, hey, I want to stay an extra day, I can teach from wherever and not miss a class,
Right.
not have to call in or cancel on my parents.
Now, since you said you don't really do the lab classes, whenever you bring your computer with you, do you have very much that you have to have outside of your computer screen, or all of your classes, like everything is digital right there? You just pull it up.
Everything is digital. Everything is digital. I make my own worksheets. I send out the materials beforehand that I've created. And everything is, I have a slideshow, but a lot of it is discussion. If the students are taking notes, then I'm highlighting it within the presentation. Most of my students in Asian countries will take notes, and I will share the video with them so they can go back and take additional notes if they need to. But other than that, we're learning how to condense our notes, like Cornell style notes anyway.
Okay.
But no, I don't have like props or anything.
Right. Now, and because I'm an art teacher, you can't see my supplies around here, but everything is within arm's reach, which, believe me, I never thought that as an art teacher that never sat down, I could do that.
Yeah.
And I've made it work and I love it. But I am occasionally envious of the fact that I can't, I have 2 devices. I have the document camera, I have my supplies. I can't just take my small tablet with me and do something.
So
but
I have a question though, because I
Okay.
do have an art teacher friend, and she has like a document camera phone app. So she'll have like a stand of some sort that she keeps it on. Is that something that you would be able to do?
Oh yeah, I've done that. I've used my phone and it's not as bulky,
Okay.
it just, my normal setup is spread out, so, and then whenever I did travel and teach, it was like, okay, how can I condense all of my supplies? Because I had painting and drawing classes where if I were to plan ahead, it would be like, okay, just drawing, nothing messy, but
Okay.
That's awesome that you were able to just pick up like that, take your stuff with you and still teach and not have to cancel anything or change somebody else's schedule because your schedule changed.
Yes.
Yeah. So you said that you also are a moderator for, or an admin for, a Facebook group for the international students. So tell me, who do you see make the most comments or ask the most questions? Parents, teachers? What kind of responsibility and time investment is it to admin that kind of group?
So I am a moderator in that group, and that group used to be invite only for teachers. And so that parents had to recommend their teachers that had scheduled hours for their time zones, that had good like reviews in terms of the international families. Now they have opened it up a little bit more. However, I actually was just talking to the admin this morning. So there's roughly 368 teachers in the United States. Then we have some from the UK and Australia, but there's over 1,000 parents. And like I have the breakdown of all the countries that they're represented from there. Now, there's not really a need for parents to interact in that group because of the way that she organizes the group. So there are threads that every week, like 2 weeks in advance, she'll ask for: post your art classes or music classes here, post your language classes here. So parents can go directly. It's very organized.
Oh, that's really nice.
Yeah.
They're not sifting through a bunch of noise.
And also, another thing is there's sometimes a language barrier. So the parents don't necessarily want to post. So if they do, they might send us like a private message and say, hey, I'm looking for this, but you know, maybe their English isn't perfect, or they've used Google Translate or something. Parents are allowed to post and say, hey, I'm in this time zone and I'm really having trouble finding an art class between these hours in London. Any suggestions? And so then myself or the other admins, we might have recommendations, and then other parents will chime in with their recommendations. But really the parents can go and find what they're looking for. Now it's up to the teachers to actually post their classes in there so that parents can find them. But
so, do you feel that this group is really helpful outside of just the search features in Outschool to connect those parents and connect those students to teachers that would make sense?
Absolutely, because there are so many classes to sift through, and the search feature on Outschool isn't always the most accurate. So like parents have not been able to find me sometimes because that class, I don't have it starting till, let's say, January. So it's not going to come up in their search, even though they don't care if it's starting in January. They just want to know, do I have that class available? They can go to my profile, but if they have favorited, let's say, I don't know, 100 teachers, they would have to scroll through that to find, like, there's no organizational features for them.
Right.
So this way they can go right to a Facebook page that are only teachers that serve international families. So they don't have to, like, there's no way for them to filter, I want something from this time to this time, and then actually have an accurate feed. I know that Outschool has been working on improving their search features. That's like a constant thing, but I'm sure that with all the advancements, that's like another, you know, tech thing that they would need to work on. But this is just all in one place, and they can find teachers that cater to international families.
So what led you to have most of your classes geared toward the international times?
So as a special ed teacher that primarily deals with behaviors and academic children that need academic support, I found that there are far less behaviors in the classroom with my international learners. If a parent is there, present, they're off screen, they're not up, they're not running around, they take education extremely seriously. I mean, just as a basic like example, I had a student who was giggling at the end of class because we were saying our goodbyes and he found something really funny in our science class. His mother had him write a page apology on how it was inappropriate to act that way in class. He's so sorry, professor, this, that, and the other. And she was extremely, her message to me was, I am so sorry, he will never act like that again. You know, that was immature behavior. I've never seen that with any, I mean, my students in Asia, my students in Europe, the education is the top priority. So
Mhm.
this is a new trend that we're seeing with more ESOL teachers coming on. But I will tell you, from the 90%, 80% of students I have, they don't want ESOL. They want challenging. They want
Oh,
the
okay.
academic rigor. If they
Right.
wanted something like that, they would look for it, but that they're not coming here to look for that. They want their kids to have academic language in science. They want them to have more critical thinking. They want them to be able to have conversational English about academics. They don't want the prop. I don't have any props here, but they don't want props, and
Right.
they don't want that. So it's very academically challenging. So I can take my curriculum that challenges high school students, and I've modified it for my students that are 8 and 9 years old, and that makes those parents happy, and that makes me happy because it's what's
Right.
worked for
Yeah,
me.
I've done that too, because you can teach the same concept. It's just knowing where your students are and what amount of challenge or how you can adapt it to each group that you're teaching.
Absolutely.
So the critical thinking one class is interesting to me because that isn't your typical, you know, math, science, art, music, whatever. So explain a little bit about what you do or what type of things you cover in that particular type of class.
Okay, so I've done this in brick and mortar schools, and it usually was my bell ringer, and I would either show a piece of artwork or I would put up a scenario, and students would write about it and their interpretation. How do you interpret this piece of art? Or how do you interpret this situation? So in my teen class, we have a class that is it legal? Is it moral? Is it ethical? So let's talk about, we talk about, let's say, the death penalty, and they talk about, where is it legal in the world? What does that look like in other countries? And we talk about that. And then we say, is that moral or is it ethical to have death penalties such as these? Is it legal in your country? And they discuss it from all these different countries. And then it makes them really think about their own judicial system and that
Mhm.
of other countries. We talk about all different things. Like this morning in that same class, I've tailored it for my younger students. We were talking about fairy tales. And I asked the younger learners, they're 7 to 10, if they feel that fairy tales are beneficial for children. And one of the girls from Poland said, I think it gives a bad impression of what girls are supposed to look like. So, like, she's critically thinking about this, she's discussing it. And then one of the other kids who lives in Asia said, but there's things like Brave that show that girls are powerful. And she's like, yeah, but that's the
Uh-huh.
only one. There's no other ones. Like in all the other ones, they need help with something. So they get to talk about things that they wouldn't normally talk about, or they don't usually discuss when they're watching a movie or reading a fairy tale, and they can critique it from different, a different angle.
Right. And having, I love, I mean, there's lots of critique that happens in art. So I love that you get them to think about these things. And then since it is mostly international students, I hadn't really thought about just what different points of view you would hear from. And then they're learning so much from each other because of that.
And like, for example, we were discussing fairy tales this morning. So we were discussing Cinderella, but there is a Cinderella story from like there's like, I don't know, 30 different countries, right? So there's the
Mhm.
Chinese Cinderella and the Egyptian Cinderella, Mexican Cinderella, all these different Cinderellas. So we discussed the Korean Cinderella. And if you compare that one to the Chinese Cinderella story is kind of scary. So we discussed,
Oh,
yeah, it's kind of scary. So we discussed, like, do the elements of a fairy tale, can children at the age of 3 and 4 differentiate between reality and a story? Can they do that at 3 or 4? And some of them said, yeah, it's a story is a story. And then some of them said, wait a minute, if you're 3 or 4, you might start thinking that all step parents are bad. And then if you get a step parent in your life, you might be afraid of that person because in
mhm.
all the stories, the step parents are bad. So these are just things that they're discussing from all these different perspectives, which is, I think it's a great way for them to start thinking critically about a lot of different topics topics. I mean, I have another critical thinking, which is a survival class, and I put them in different locations. So like Mount Fuji or on a boat. And I tell them, you are stranded there all by yourself. I'm going to give you 3 tools. How would you use these tools to survive given this location? And they're random tools. Like when they're on a boat, they get 100 toothpicks. How would you use these 100 toothpicks? I've done this with adults too, though. It makes us look at everyday objects. Like,
right.
What would I have to do?
Oh, this is one of the things that I always ask. And it's one of my questions in a flex class that I just had answered by a student. And it's, when do you feel you were most creative? And it does not have to be artistically creative. And one of my students was talking about a survival class that he and his friends took, but it was in person and they had to build a shelter and they were given only small things, but it's all about problem solving.
Exactly. I love that though. I love that. I mean, my daughter and I have done things like that, but there was one where there was a competition and you had to build a Christmas or holiday themed tree with all items that could only be recycled. And I was like, and like the first thing, of course, that comes to my head is plastic bottles, right? And I'm like, wait, there's like a million things that can be recycled. I could use so much. It was kind of like an artsy project if you think about it, but you had to consider all the different things that could be recycled, and it took more time than people think to be that creative.
I love whenever you just start really thinking through things to be able to problem solve, because too many people give up so easily on stuff, and it's like, okay, wait, there has to be a solution. How can you fix this? How can you make do with what you have? How can you utilize something in a different way? You know, you can be so creative in so many ways. So the critical thinking class is just, oh my gosh, that's teaching students how to survive in the real world in so many different scenarios.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, I just love that. I mean, that's one of the things about being a virtual teacher as well, is you get to teach what you want to teach. Like you said, you're not following a curriculum. And so I bet these classes have just developed throughout time based on what you've experienced with your students too, right?
Yes. So like the legal, is it legal? Is it moral? Is it ethical? That was actually something I created for my reading class in high school when special ed did not have a curriculum. We were just like, here, they said, teach whatever you want. Here's a textbook if you want to use it. If they can't do it, here are some other ideas, have at it. And I was like, wait a minute, like, let me use literature. So the only way that I've made this different is that class does not require reading. Whereas the one in person, there was actual literature in, like, I would reference certain books that went along with each theme. Like there's a theme about euthanasia. We would read a book about euthanasia, and then we would discuss, is it legal? Is it moral? Is it ethical? So the students do not read that in my Outschool classes. However, I do give them a recommendation. If you want to read more about this topic, these are some, young adult literature, that you could read. So that's how I've modified that for Outschool.
Right, because copyright issues, teaching virtually, and as we're business owners, so we can't use so many different resources that you could in a public school setting. So that's one way that you were able to modify or figure something out.
Exactly. And that one was actually my high school students always want me to talk about my experience as I was a correctional officer before I was a teacher. And I'm like, I don't know if those stories are appropriate. So this is a way that I can discuss laws and bring out other perspectives, and say, wait a minute, because we talk about employment and is this legal? Is it moral? Is it ethical? And I said, well, should we hire felons? And they're like, no. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. What are they going to do then when they get out of, let's discuss what we want to have done as a society. Yeah. So they've come up with really great ideas, but yes, copyright is definitely an issue. I send them to resources that they can look at afterwards. The way that I get around most of that is I have authors that I work with personally, and they're independent independently published. So, right, they're self-published. So I get their permission. Like this author, actually, she comes to my classroom. She made an appearance in the classroom. She got to meet the students. Yeah. So all of their projects that they're doing in class or their drawings, their parents give permission. They send pictures. I send it to the author. She puts it on her social media with their permission. They have like permission. But I have another author that I work with. He actually recorded a video. It's one of my intro class videos for Outschool. He recorded a video to my students, potential students, like,
oh, that's so nice. It's like, I will be meeting you, but
yes.
not in person.
Yeah. And so I work with, and I feel it's a great way to connect readers with people that they admire, like, right, like really get them hooked on reading, and you know, they look up to these people. They also are supporting these small authors, not these big publishing companies, but these small authors. And then they get to even, like, one of my students said, why'd she choose us? She's popular. She's on Amazon. She's this. Why'd she choose us? Right.
He's got plenty of popularity. Let's start building up those other small businesses, right?
Yeah. So it's a great way for them to get their name out there. And I also encourage parents to write a review on Amazon for their books if they like them. This author in particular has 2 books in her series so far. So that actually, I have a class 1, it's a whole semester class, and the kids love it. So now I have a semester 2, and they're going to be reading the second book with me.
Right. So there you were able to build up your classes while also helping build her business.
Exactly.
Which there we talk, it's kind of full circle, bringing it back to collaboration. And you have coworkers that aren't just teachers, essentially, because you're working with these publishers, you're connecting and networking with other careers too.
Absolutely. And there are some YouTube content creators, because we can't use YouTube videos unless they're available for commercial use. But I have reached out to YouTube creators who have given me permission to use their content. One of them has like reptiles and things like that, and he does interviews and he has them on there. But I've collaborated with him. Somebody else, I have like a very minimal, like I charge like $1 to teach about animal rescue. So I have local nonprofits that do animal rescue that have allowed me to use their videos to teach students the importance of animal rescues and what they do and how they got into it and things like that. So I collaborate with nonprofits, with authors, illustrators, content creators on YouTube, lots of different digital artists. For one of my classes, after they've completed the 16 weeks, I make an adult coloring sheet for them of all the animals that we learned about. So that's another creator that I can link them to, because he made me like a work, like essentially it's like a coloring book of these animals that we learned about. So
that's awesome bonus content. Yeah.
Yeah, I just think it's really great too. And also on my Outschool teacher Facebook page, that's who I collaborate with on there. I tag the authors, I tag the illustrators, I tag the other teachers. Like I have a class coming up and it's a world geography class. So I have reached out to different language teachers and said, hey, we're going to be learning about all these different countries. What do you teach? What do you teach? So I have an Arabic teacher, a French teacher, a Spanish teacher, all of this. And so I give the parents a list. If your children are interested in learning any of these languages, here are some teachers they can go to. I also have a teacher who's creating culinary classes for these different countries that we're learning about. So if they want to learn how to cook food from Poland or wherever, they can take her classes. I have I don't know if she's doing it anymore, but there was an art teacher who was going to do like different art inspired from different countries, like, or different continents, like African inspired art or, you know, European inspired art. So I can refer them after those classes in that series to those teachers.
So this is your personal page or like business page that you cater to Outschool students and parents then, so that there's just, it's like a way for you to help advertise your classes outside of just the Outschool platform, correct?
Yes. And so it's It's all done on that Facebook page. However, everything sends them back to Outschool. Like they need to contact me through Outschool. They can comment on posts if they want, that's fine, but they can't message me. There's not a way for them to get a hold of me. If they need to message me, they need to get a hold of me on Outschool. But it's also a way for me, like sometimes I'll offer specials for my classes, and rather than post it in some discount group, I want to give back to the parents that have been with me since day one. So I'll say, before you get my email, before you get the email generated by Outschool saying that I have a new class, here it is. If you see it right now, I have it posted for $10 off. So if you join now, then it'll be $10 off. After that, once you get the email, it's going to the original price. So that way my regulars, my regulars are getting those discounts.
Which I wholeheartedly believe it's best to cater to those that have been loyal, like give them those bonuses. They always appreciate it, you know, so it's not like you don't want to offer discounts or some sort of special to entice new families sometimes, but the families that come back time after time after time are going to appreciate it so much. So that's
my international families, like if I give them a discount and I don't confirm it with them, they'll message me, don't discount me, you're worth every penny. Like the international families, the international families, they don't even want the discounts. I found different. I found it a little bit different in other places, but my international families, they're like, stop. If you give me another discount, I'm going to sign up for a class and just not even go. Don't. Like, I want you to, they want me to be paid. It's like their point.
They see the value of what you're offering.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
Throughout this conversation, my goodness, we've learned so much, and it seems like there's a lot of value that you have to offer. So where can people find you? How can they connect to your classes and have you as an amazing teacher?
Well, on Outschool, I mean, they can find me under my name, Kristen Mercurio. And then I have the Facebook page, which is Miss M Outschool Teacher is my Facebook page. And then outside of that, I'm usually doing life coaching, things like that. So yeah.
Well, I will make sure that I link those in the show notes so that they don't have to just blindly search and try to spell it, since you are Coach M or known as Miss M to your students. So that way they can find you easily.
And I would love to know if you do any animals, like I see animals in the background there. If you have art classes, especially like the endangered animals, I teach a whole class series on that. If you have art classes like that, I would love to funnel them to you. So, because we just practice drawing and I don't have an example, but I tell my kids all the time, I am not an artist. I am doing this because we learn the body parts. So we draw them. I'm like, and my students who are 5, 6, 7, 8, they draw a lot better than me.
Well, animals are the way I run my ongoing classes is I allow the students to choose the subject matter. And so I have a list of some of the wildest, craziest things that we've drawn because they've requested it. And I wouldn't have drawn that if it was me determining what the schedule would be. And I have other classes as well. And one of them that's really fun is a pet show and tell drawing class, because you always see pets climbing across their keyboard or in the background, and they love showing them off. And then we draw animals throughout all of that as well. But yeah, collaboration is always great. So
I have to tell, just one student came to mind who has like 17 frogs and some rats.
Oh my goodness.
I am sending that student, well, they're sisters, your way, because that'll be a lot of show and tell drawing.
We've had a rat on someone's shoulder before. Just this week, we had 2 birds on a boy's shoulder. You know, we have the regular cats and dogs, but we've seen some really, really unique pets. It is so much fun. I mean, adults, when you're in a Zoom with adults, they get excited when they see someone's pet. You know, it doesn't matter what age you are talking to. So that is one of my favorite classes to teach for sure.
Awesome. Well, I will definitely look for that and send it to them, because I know those 2 especially would love that.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for being here. It was a really fun conversation. So I appreciate you being part of this podcast episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. See ya.
Thank you. See you later.
Well, I want to say thank you so much to Kristen to Miss M for sharing all that she has shared. It is such good, helpful information for other virtual teachers. I hope you find some inspiration from her, and this has ignited some creativity in your teacher business.